Ben Crawford, welcome to Dad Edge, my friend.
Thank you, Larry. It's good to be here.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Start out with some fun questions. How about that?
All right. Let's do it.
Before we get to 2,000 miles on the Appalachian, if I can only talk, Appalachian Trail with 6 kids. Holy cow. Can't wait to talk about that. Let's get to some fun questions here first. Not that any of the questions I'm going to ask you aren't fun, but what's your favorite thing to do outside of raising 6 children?
Oh, man. I like playing racquetball.
Okay.
And I like getting tattoos. Right. And I like smoking cigars.
Dude, let me see that one tattoo on your left hand that I caught a glimpse of before we started talking.
That one right there?
Yeah, man. It's like an upside down eyeball. For those 8.
Well, there. Now it's right side up. And then here, since I have 6 kids, this is my latest. These are all their birthdays in my own handwriting.
Nice.
So now I never forget. I mean, I still forget, but now I can check.
There you go. I like that, man. So 6 kids. And so for those of you guys, this is, I'm going to have to check and see what episode this is real quick. But you guys got to check out our YouTube channel because if you want to see Ben's ginormous eyeball that's tattooed on his left hand, yes, it's right there. This is episode gooddadproject.com/303. We'll have a link in the show notes for you. But I got to ask you now that I didn't plan on asking this question. What's the eyeball represent?
Oh, man. Okay. So, do I really want to get into this? I told you there's no off limits questions. And so actually it's the eyeball of my 4-year-old son. It's his eye.
Okay.
So it's the full eyelid. And it's about, this is what I'll say. I got it based upon an experience I had experimenting with psychedelics about seeing the world through the perspective of kids.
Okay. So maybe the next question is how long did he have to hold his eyeball open like that for the tattoo artist, right?
That's the glory of a picture, because right. I don't think that would have been very feasible.
Right. Yeah. I was just kidding. Another question. Name one thing that you appreciate about your wife.
My wife doesn't care about expensive or fancy things. So if I buy her like a brand name something, she doesn't even notice, which actually kind of backfires because she doesn't notice when I actually do like brand name things. She won't buy them for me either. But on the flip side, I don't have to wow her with status type items. I
gotcha. Very cool. And what has been a key learning of raising 6 kids?
I think, and I guess this is a theme of the book also, but the more I've learned to let go, the happier I've been. And I believe the better our parenting has been, if you even call it like a proactive activity like that.
Well, I can't wait to get in the show now. So let's talk about that for a second. 6 kids. What is your number one patience hack or patience skill set that keeps you sane?
Like to get patience myself?
Mm-hmm. Like, chaos is ensuing, the family, it's going, your house is loud, crazy. Maybe one's throwing a temper tantrum, one's doing this, there's messes everywhere. What keeps you calm?
Well, our mindset has evolved so much in the 20 years since we had our first kid, but so in terms of like belief systems and whatnot, but I think the biggest belief that helps me now is in the back of my mind, I believe things are going to be okay, both like life in the world and also my kids. Like they're going to quote unquote, like turn out, like they're not going to be so screwed up, based on something I either do right or don't do, or if I'm not proactive enough. And I used to deep down always fear that, I think, like either because of the way I was taught in church or watching other parents, that I got to do something more, something right. So I burned so much energy and frustration with that belief system. And I'm really happy I don't have it anymore.
I can already tell, man, this podcast interview is going to be gold without a doubt. So
good.
All right, let's get started. Let's start with little Ben. What was it like growing up for you?
Well, I grew up in Washington State, surrounded by mountains, and my parents were interracially married. My dad traveled the world, used the army to travel the world, and met my mom in Korea. And so I grew up in the Pacific Northwest around the outdoors, and I was used to thinking outside of the box. The reason why I mentioned the interracial marriage was at that time in a small town to do that was a bit unusual. And so from a young age, I learned to kind of not, I guess, to question the status quo and to kind of just like live the way you believe is the best way to live versus trying to measure up to whatever society says. So I was definitely allowed that freedom as a child to explore, to sell candy out of my locker in high school. I got a tattoo the day I turned 18 and, dyed my hair blue and green, and my parents always supported that.
How many siblings?
I had a younger brother and a younger sister. So I was the oldest of three.
Nice. Okay. And parents still together?
Yeah, they're together and they live in a house in our backyard.
They live in a house in your backyard?
Yep.
All right. Cool. So they get
it's like not technically our backyard. Our backyard's joined. There's a street here and a street here. And I bought the two houses that share the backyard. So we tore the wall down or the fence. And in terms of our kids' view, they walk through their backyard to my parents' house.
Now, did you do that to have babysitters on access 24/7?
That has been a side benefit, but now our kids are old enough to babysit kind of each other and themselves. But I did it so that my mom would plant a garden in our backyard.
All right.
Which is, I guess, by proxy, a natural babysitter.
Yeah, no kidding. Very cool, man. Okay. So how long have you been married?
I have been married for 20 years.
20 years. And your oldest is 20.
Yep. So we were pregnant in about maybe a month to 3 months after we got married, and we had a kid by our first wedding anniversary.
Wow. You guys did not waste any time.
No. And I don't regret it at all. Although at that time we were on welfare. My wife was in nursing school. I was waiting tables for, minimum wage, and everyone was telling us to wait to have kids. But I'm so glad we didn't.
Yeah. How old are you?
41.
Wow. 40.
So we got married when we were 20.
Yeah.
And so, celebrated the big one last year, I guess.
That's awesome. I'm 45. My oldest is only 14 as we record this. And then my youngest, the caboose, he's 4, which I know the front engine for you is 20. The caboose is 4 years old. What's the mix like in between?
Well, let's see. That's a tough question. And that's the very reason why I tattooed it all on my arm, because they're always changing. But I guess we have a 20-year-old. Our second just turned 18. Then I think we have one that's 16, and then 13, and then 9, and then 4. Is that 6?
I think carry the one.
Is anyone keeping track out there?
I don't know. Somebody will leave an iTunes review.
Don't fact check that. You can fact check everything else.
Yeah. And what's the mix of boys and girls?
We have 4 girls and 2 boys.
And where are the boys at in the mix?
My boy is my 4-year-old.
Okay.
So that was his eye on my hand. And then also I think it's 15 or 16. I might've missed him in the countdown. But I think he might be 16.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's just go back to your childhood real quick before we jump into marriage. And then of course, this amazing adventure that you guys took. Parents are still together. You're the oldest of 3. Just by example, just by watching your dad and mom, what was something that you learned about marriage? And it could be good, it can be bad, it could be neutral, it could be whatever you want, but something that as you grew up, you're like, wow, like that's a heck of a lesson. And maybe it's something you even look back on and reflect and you're either like, wow, that really serves me, or it really impacts me in a negative way.
I think one positive, one negative thing maybe is on the positive side. My parents did anything for relationships. They prioritized relationships over money, over like even, I guess what you'd call it, like manners or common sense. Like they would drop anything and drive radical distances to hang out with friends and family when other people would say like, oh, that doesn't make sense. On the negative side, my parents and this is probably a byproduct of the culture they were raised in, but they didn't talk a lot about feelings or communicate about their origin or things like that. So that is something that I value very highly. And I felt kind of more lonely in my home environment growing up because there was a lot of things I wanted to talk about that I didn't have anyone to talk to. So my wife and I have done a lot of like therapy and counseling, and we read a lot about relationships and just our own childhood stuff, so that we can communicate that with each other and even provide a place where our kids can talk about it, those types of things if they choose.
That's really cool, man. I think a lot of us, every guest we've had on the show, there's always been, it doesn't matter what the upbringing was, whether it was super challenging or whether it was like ideal or anything in between. There are always some really cool learnings of things that you're like, wow, I like that. I'm going to take that with me. And then there are some other things you're like, yeah, I'm going to leave that. I'm okay with leaving that behind. Right. So.
Yeah. And I've even changed my view on that with, instead of seeing it as a negative or something I'm even leaving behind, it's something I'm building upon, because I think it did get me to a certain point. And I like to think my parents did the best they could with what they had. But I want to take it further with what they gave me. So I think that gives me a little bit of a less negative view on it. Because I spent a lot of years pretty angry at the way they parented me, but I just found out that wasn't the most helpful long-term feeling to have.
Yeah, it doesn't really serve us. Even if you came from a traumatic background. I mean, my childhood was definitely challenging, without a doubt. My mom was married, in and out of marriages quite a bit. Married a total of 3 times. There was another guy in there who lived with us for a couple of years, and then dated, several men in between as well. And it was always like this toxicity. It was always like it was the same guy, just different face, different name, right?
Yeah.
And there was a long time that I spent angry, victim mindset, all those things.
Yeah.
And then you realize you're like, man, this is like not really serving me at all or anything in my life. But you can
maybe it was at one point. I think it's a stage maybe you need to go through at some point. But at least, I don't know the story with your mom, but I like to think that people were doing the best with what they had. Mm-hmm. And that helps me get past the anger, although I don't think there's not a way around it on some level.
I agree with that. Even if you came from a challenging background, you do the best with what you have at the time, even if it's not ideal, right? But now that we are parents, we definitely know how hard it can be, and no doubt about that.
Yeah. And I think our kids are going to be bitching about us someday.
Oh yeah.
And saying the same thing. So I hope whatever script I write with my parents and critiquing them, I think I'm laying the groundwork for the script my kids will use with me. So that's even part of why when I say, I hope my kids assume that I did the best with what I had, and they're not going to say, oh, my dad did it this way. Screw that. I'm doing it this way.
Yeah.
I want to get them to a certain point, but I want them to go beyond it. So
I'll say this last thing before we jump into your book. And I don't say this because it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm not. I think my 14-year-old is just one of those kids. He's just too kind. And he always tells me, he's like, you're the greatest dad in the world. You're awesome. You're amazing. And I'm like, you give me way too much credit. I was like, you do see I have bad moments every day, sometimes several, right? And I was like, and the older you get, you're going to realize like, wow, like my dad was cool. There were some bad things he did. Like there were some nasty things he said, like, and he didn't always do the right thing. And I was like, and that's going to mess with you. And I was like, but the one thing that I'll tell you, I was like, today is my first day raising 4 kids, with the oldest being 14 years old, 222 days old. Tomorrow will be my first day raising 4 kids with a 14-year-old that's 14 years old, 223 days old. I was like, so every day is new. Every phase you get within your childhood and your 3 brothers is a new day. Like you, as a parent, what I tell them as a parent, sometimes you feel like it's the first day of school almost every day. Like there are different things that pop up that you just didn't plan on. And I was like, and as you go through life and you look back on some of these things that I did wrong, the one thing that I'll tell you is that we do the best job that we possibly can with the information that we have right at that moment. Right. And not all moments are going to be pretty. I was like, but we do the best we can, and you will too with your kids. So, yeah.
Yeah. And to wrap up, to go back to your first question you asked about, how do I keep sane? with the kids, I've found it very valuable to believe that the kids are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They're doing the best they can with what they have. And there's times where my kids will spill some crazy stuff and I'll be raging because I'm like, are you trying to ruin my life? But, I just have to believe, the more I believe that they're doing the best they can with what they have and not trying to make my life difficult, as it's so easy to see as a dad or parent, I found that helps me with my relationship with them too.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, let's get to this adventure. I want to go, what was the year you actually did the adventure?
So we started the hike March 1st of 2018. And we finished it August 9th of 2018. So it was 5 months and 9 days, 161 days of walking.
Okay.
So for that time period, that 5 months, we went through 3 seasons. We started in winter and it was 20 degrees and we're going through blizzards and stuff. And we ended in summer. And for that 161 days, we averaged 13.6 miles every single day. It was a half marathon a day of walking. So we turned into machines.
My God.
We lost crazy amounts of weight. I lost something like 30 pounds in the first, 3 or 4 weeks, like on accident. You just turn into an athlete out there. So the before and after pictures are really kind of wild of our family. Cause, I can't think of a workout that would create that. They should market it and sell it as a product, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Who wants to do P90X when you can just hike the Appalachian Trail for 5 months?
Yeah, well, I guess there are some benefits of being able to stay inside and do it in your underwear. But yeah, it was quite the experience. And of that 13 days, we have the 13 miles a day. I think we took 12 or 13 days off in that entire time period. So that actually means the days we were walking, we were actually doing more than 13 miles a day.
That's unreal. And let me get this straight. At the time, you had a 2-year-old.
Yes, we had a 2-year-old. So my oldest turned 17 on the trail. So there was me and my wife and our 6 kids. We were the largest family to ever finish the trail. And at the time, our 7-year-old was the youngest female to have ever completed the trail. So she walked it the whole way. And my son, who was 2, we carried him on our backs for like virtually the entire way. He may have walked 10 miles of it or something, or maybe a little more. But yeah, he was added weight, which also meant that's less. It was kind of a difficult challenge because we have 8 people's worth of gear that we're only able to hold on 6 people's backs, because one of us had to hold the child too. So it was kind of an efficiency challenge that way.
All right. So I have an outside the box question. Well, this actually is probably a very common question that you get. Before we get into the actual trail and some of the detail and some of the learnings and some of the moments and all that good stuff, were you and your wife just like sitting on the deck one day and you're like, just maybe staring at your in-laws' house and be like, you know what? We should walk for 5 straight months with all of our kids and with the 2-year-old, 13 miles a day. I think we should do that. Where did this idea come from?
We, like a lot of people, we discovered the Appalachian Trail early on in our marriage. We were actually on a bike trip, biking across the country. And we met these people staying in a garage. They were on the Appalachian Trail. And I'd never heard of backpacking or hiking. And they were older. I think they were 55 and 60. And I just hadn't heard of such a thing. And there's just people, when you hear about the Appalachian Trail, the second you hear it exists, you can't not think about it. And you're just like, I have to do that. And for whatever reason, we were that type of people where I heard about it at the time. My wife didn't want to do it at all. So I was pushing to do it some 17 years ago, and that fell through. And then we started having kids. And I think we were kind of like, well, I guess that means we're done with this dream. Like our life is over. We have to wait till they're gone. We kind of bought into that narrative. But then we started incorporating more and more adventure with our kids. Like we started doing these 100-mile hikes. My first marathon I ran with my 8-year-old son. So my kids have all run probably now close to 8 or 9 marathons. My daughter ran her first marathon when she was 6. They've run ultra marathons with me. So we started to learn that like kids could do stuff and it was more fun with them. So by the time it was like my daughter was going to be 18 basically. And we were like, this is the last year we have to do this all as a family. So that kind of lit a fire under our ass. And we're like, the excuse that kids can't do it, we no longer had. So it was like, we had to come up with a good reason not to do it. We couldn't. So we just almost like had to do it. That's how it felt.
Dude, you're blowing my mind right now, man. Like seriously, like I'm sitting here thinking like, I've got a 7-year-old. Like I can't imagine like that kid just running out and doing a marathon. So just real quick, how long did it take your daughter who is 6 to run a marathon? How many hours?
I think her first marathon maybe was 7 hours. And I think now she's I think we've got it down to maybe 5 or 6 hours. We don't keep track of the time. Like we try and finish the marathon before the course gets closed. But they stop and play on playgrounds. And we stop and eat. But she's done our ultra marathon that we did. She did, I think it was 40 miles in 24 hours. It was a 24-hour race. So she's 9 now and she's done, I think 4 marathons. So it's just something we do every year.
That's insane. I mean, do people think that you are absolutely crazy? Like, have you gotten like just looks of like, what is wrong with you people?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the easiest way to make sense of us is to write us off that way. And I think it makes it so that it doesn't implicate them because
exactly,
like this is what we learned about walking in the Appalachian Trail. I mean, I'm totally fine, by the way, if people don't want to do it. Like, you're not going to get my judgment. I'm not here to convince people to hike or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's weird. Like we received a certain amount of fame and notoriety and people calling us crazy for what? Like, what did we do? We walked. It's not a difficult thing when you look at it that way. Like literally everyone with legs can walk. But I think because when you walk away from like the status quo, that really confuses people. So it's almost easier for them to say you're crazy instead of think that maybe they could accomplish something like that or something, difficult, really.
It's fascinating. Fascinating.
So yeah, we get called crazy all the time. That's like part of and we had like, there was all these websites dedicated to like basically how crazy we were and making fun of us while we were doing our hike, and people called like CPS on us and we had the government show up and interview our kids and threaten to take them away. Yeah. This was all during the hike because people are freaked out by the idea of not going to school and walking in the woods with your kids. They think it's dangerous. I mean, and I guess it is like, we were going through blizzards and crap, but I think driving into McDonald's is dangerous. Like more people die from heart disease and car accidents than walking.
True.
So,
wow. All right. So let's get to some of the epic moments on this hike. What were some of the most elevated moments of, I would just say, happiness, content, being proud of what you guys were doing, maybe something that the kids said or did or something like that?
Yeah, one of the biggest moments was, so I carried the 2-year-old for about the first 500 miles, and I was losing weight like crazy. The pack was 44 pounds. So that's like, I've never done armed forces, but I think that's like rucksack weight, or maybe they'll probably say it's 60 pounds, but whatever. It's a heavy pack for the Appalachian Trail, but you can't make it any lighter because you got a kid back there. What are you going to do? Chop off his leg, unlike other packs where you can lighten your load. So I was losing a massive amount of weight. I was dying. My hip was going numb. I would set my alarm for 8 minutes and I would lay down and I would fall asleep in about a minute and I could get about a 6-minute nap in. Like I was doing that like by the hour, just to keep on going. And in the Shenandoahs, 500 miles in Virginia, my kids, we show up like kind of late because I'm carrying this pack, and they're like, "What's taking you so long?" And I'm like, "This is heavy. Like, if you want to fucking carry the kid, why don't you do it?" And it was kind of one of those things you say not to. I wasn't really suggesting it. I was just kind of like tossing it, like it was a retort. And my 17-year-old daughter, she was 16 at the time. She was like, "Fine, I'll do it." And I was like, great, you'll see. So she did it and she killed it. She carried him for 4 miles. And at this point, we didn't think we were going to be able to finish on our timeline. She carried him 4 miles without complaining, mostly to probably prove me wrong. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, like the kids can actually do this. They weren't able to do it before, not because they weren't able, but because I wasn't willing to let them try. Like I was like, I'm the dad. Like I'll do the tough jobs here, kids. Like stand back. Like I got this, you know? And it was this really humbling experience. And then for the next 1,500, 1,700 miles, my oldest 3 kids and me rotated carrying him for 30-minute shifts. So then I carried him 30 minutes for every 2 hours. And we increased our mileage by about like 25%, which then set the stage for us to be able to finish the trail. But it was this huge humbling moment as a parent where I realized, you know, we started off and I said, letting go. Like the reason we weren't making mileage, I was doing what I thought was the responsible parenting thing, like bearing down, working harder, like doing the dad thing, but actually like letting go of control and being like, fine, let's give this a shot. I mean, I didn't have the best attitude when I tried it. I wanted her to be wrong and for my ego boost to her to fail and for me like, okay, dad, you're the strong one here. But it was actually by letting go that, I mean, I cried that night and it just made me question how many other things are there that my kids could do that I'm not letting them do because I'm afraid of watching them fail or I want to be the tough guy. That's one moment.
So thanks for sharing that, man. I think that's more of an epidemic that we as fathers carry. And I think you're right. A lot of it has to do with ego, but I also think a lot of it comes from a noble place. Like I want to show my kids how hard I'm working. I want to show my kids how many hours I'm pulling, how much blood, sweat, and tears I can, you know, just basically sweat out, bleed out, whatever. Right. And I think you're right. We don't necessarily serve them, I think, in the best possible way if we're not allowing them to step into things that they didn't even think that they could do. Because the whole point of parenting, right? The whole point of being a father is to teach your kids not to need you. You know, I had a Navy SEAL on not too long ago, and he was talking about you always saw the guys and buds who were coddled when they were young, because it was almost like when things got tough, they were screaming for mom or dad, and you can't do that. And if you're in a firefight in the middle of a war zone, dad ain't coming to help you. Like you've got to be able to take care of business on your own. Right. So that is definitely a profound moment. I can definitely see why you cried, because that's a huge teaching moment, not only for your kids, but for you as well.
Yeah. And it's hard to empower our kids because intrinsically it means that I'm going to be less powerful, you know, instead of me being the only one that can do the thing, believing that they can do it and letting them do it. That happened across the entire board for us, you know, they carried weight, they did cooking, they did all the grocery shopping. Like one of my kids was responsible to buy all the breakfasts and carry the breakfasts, and one of them the lunches and one of them the dinners. When we get to a town, one of them would do the laundry. You know, it was a full team thing. It was so cool to be, you know, at home. This is why what made the trail so great with this kind of outdoor survival element. At home, we tell our kids to do things, but the jobs feel pretty placating to me. It's like, go clean your room. It's like, okay, how valuable is that to anyone? I mean, it's nice, but no one in the back of our minds, I think we all kind of know this is like a mundane job. But when you're asking a kid, like if they'll buy and carry and prepare dinners, everyone like needs the dinner. If you don't have it, you'll starve to death. You'll die. And I came to see that I think the kids, they want to contribute to the team. Like they don't want to just be little consumers. Like a lot of the resentment we have in our culture towards teenagers is we see them as just like pain in the ass consumers. Like they use our Wi-Fi, our data plans, play video games all day, and they don't do the dishes. So I think we end up like hating our kids in a way. And I fell into the trap thinking that's what they wanted. That's what everyone kind of wants, except for parents. Our job is to complain about it. But on the trail, I saw that our kids want to be contributing forces. They want to be producers. but I don't think we know how in our culture where maybe dad or mom makes all the money and then kids are resorted to chores like cleaning the room. So the trail provided this like teamwork where we actually literally needed each other and we needed the kids to step up and they wanted to step up. So it was cool to see that.
So then how has this spilled over into normal everyday living? Now that you guys are back, you did this in 2018. What have been the past 2.5 years look like at home as far as people pulling their weight?
Yeah, well, I think for me, and I don't even want to say as a dad because I don't think it's related to sex so much, but this is something the parenting team or the leadership team or my wife and I, in this case, do together. What we found is survival most of the time in America, I think, is a pretty boring like mission. If your goal is survival, like no one's really, I mean, most people that are listening to this that have a phone or data plan, they're not starving to death. So therefore, like kids, I think people get bored and then they make up stuff to do that's just to get through the day, whether it's video games or pestering their brother and sister or getting in fights or whatever. But what I found is when we have a goal that we all believe in, that's greater than any one of us can accomplish. In this case, it was the trail. But even at home, it's like other things. Like we're thinking of various projects, writing books and publishing material and making vlog episodes together. The kids are making products, art. We've gone back to the trail a couple times to feed hikers, and we've all kind of decided that's something we want to do as a family. But when the kids can get behind a project that they believe in that's bigger than survival, we've noticed kind of less fighting and more energy and excitement that just goes into their entire life. And we really saw that with the trail. Like with the trail, there was no time to fight. All your energy is being used walking and making meals and crap. So I don't know. I think just telling kids like, don't fight. That's what so much of what we do as parents. But instead of saying don't do something, if we can actually provide something that's bigger where they don't have time to fight anymore, that to me is the fun challenge back at home.
How did you deal with, I don't want to do that. I don't want to carry that. I don't want to cook that, because I think if we're talking to the men right now who have families at home, one of the things that we always deal with is, I don't want to do the dishes again. Like you get this song and dance, and then you get parents that don't make me tell you one more time, all these things, right? But I think it's important that you explain how you cultivated that type of environment on that Appalachian Trail, and then how you continue to do it and how they feel good about it.
Yeah, I love that question. One of the easiest ways is to tell a story of my first marathon. I read the book Born to Run, and I was just like, holy crap, long distance running is where it's at. And I'd never run more than 5 miles. So I registered for a marathon. My son, who was, like I said, 8, I think at the time, was like, hey, I'll do it. Neither of us had run once. We're like, well, we'll give it a shot. So we did it, and we crossed the finish line. And my wife, and I think we had 4 other kids at the time, watched us cross the finish line. And they saw everyone clapping for us, and they saw us getting the free pizza and the medal. And they were like, we want to run a marathon. I think because I saw the free pizza and the medal. And the next year, me and 4 kids ran the marathon. And then the next year, my wife joined us. And then this 5-year-old had been watching us run, and she asked if she could join the marathon. So people are always asking, how do you make your kids run? Well, I've never made a kid run ever. They just saw what it was like, and they saw that they wanted to be a part of it. And the same thing transferred over to our hiking kind of ethos. We gave the older 2 kids the option to not go on the hike, and they chose it. And when they chose it and when they owned it, we saw that it had kind of a different attitude intrinsically. All we did was we modeled how enjoyable hiking or running, for that matter, can be. But I think for a lot of people, running, like they actually hate running. So then they make their kids do it, but then their kids hate it. So then they wonder why their kids hate it. Well, it's because you hate it. So one of the key things that we've been trying to figure out in our own life is how can we enjoy things? And then if you just do it, I believe that your kids will actually want to do it. So a key point came in the hike when my son was complaining about the hike. This is in New York, about, 1,200 miles in maybe. And we gave him the option to go home, to take the train home, which would have been, it was a hard thing. Like, I wasn't bluffing, actually. It's hard to not just like threaten, be like, well, fine, you want to go home. But deep down, you're like, I'm just going to scare you. This was real. Like, we had to decide, like, would we send him? And we knew we would. And we said, listen, you have two options. One is to stay on the trail. To go home is one option, and you can play video games in the air conditioning and not have to deal with walking and bugs and carrying gear and all the rest of it. Or you can hike with us, but if you stay with us, you're going to have to own it and stop blaming us. This is your decision, and we'll support you. And he chose that, and the complaining stopped, because I think he was more complaining not about actually walking, but more about the perception of being forced to walk by us. In other words, to live by our value system and not his own. So that's one of the things, I think if you hate washing dishes and you force kids to do it, they're going to hate it. But if we can somehow find joy in some of these tasks and communicate that and invite our kids into some of these things, that's much more the exciting thing for me.
That's gold, my friend. And by the way, that's the audience thanking you right now. So there you go.
Hey, you're welcome, everyone.
What did you learn? What were some of the learning moments about, what's your wife's name?
Cammie.
Cammie. What were some learning moments about your relationship with Cammie on the trail?
Well, we had this moment very early on. It was like day 5, where everything was falling apart. When we first discovered the Appalachian Trail 17 years ago, I pictured taking these leisurely lunch breaks by the stream in the sun and swimming in the river. That's what I thought like the Appalachian Trail was going to be like. Well, day 4, we had walked through 4 days of essentially sub-freezing temperatures. Our water bottles were frozen to our chest with ice cubes in them. We couldn't even drink them, because we're talking like, the night it was going down to 10 and 20 degrees in Georgia. I didn't even know that could happen. And one discipline my wife and I had gotten into probably for about the last 5+ years, maybe 6 or 7 years, is we'd done a weekly kind of a business meeting as a couple, just to kind of like, all sorts of things, set our own personal goals, set our family goals, plan trips, just do things like stuff that I saw happen as an entrepreneur and in the business world and in startup world, but I never saw happening in his home. It seemed like at home, everyone just like gave their life over to the school system, the church, or the sports team. And they all were just like catching up all the time and letting other organizations run their family. But I had learned that just like a successful entrepreneur team would do, you sit down, you're like, hey, what do we want to accomplish? How are we going to get there? Who has what concerns? Let's go. And we did that weekly. And then on the trail, that became more important than ever, because things were not working out. Like morale was low. People were struggling. We hated the trail on day 4. And we were like, this is not working. We can't put our kids through this for another 5 months. So we adopted a new goal at that time, which was kind of a reward thing for the family and the kids of like, okay, hey, if we just give it our all, come August, we're going to plan on going to this camp in Washington that our kids like really enjoyed. And that changed the morale like in a huge way, like the next day instantaneously. But my wife and I kind of like getting away, smoking a cigar together, and even asking those questions and doing that assessment together, that's been really key for us.
Very cool. So you kind of put a reward out there for everyone to look forward to. This sounds like this definitely was no easy task whatsoever on anybody. But maybe putting that out there, that there was light at the end of the tunnel, there was something to look forward to, was helpful.
Yeah, because, adults care about hiking the Appalachian Trail but our kids, like, they didn't care about that. Like, no, they didn't even know what it was. So putting that on their resume, emotionally speaking, didn't mean anything to them. It wasn't their bucket list. So yeah, having something that they valued and associating it with that was really helpful for them.
Yeah, as we wrap up here, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the adversity that you guys faced. there were blogs out there. There were people writing bad things about you. You know, sounds like the government was called on you guys, but the theme that I want to hit is, you mentioned something early on in the show, and I can't remember exactly, to challenge the status quo, to do things differently, right? That's what Steve Jobs did. And as you look at challenging the status quo, and you have haters out there hating on you, you know, people are always so concerned with keeping up with the Joneses. They want to stay normal. What are people going to think? What are people going to do? All these things. How did you keep morale high within the family, even though you knew all these things were being said about you? On top of that, you know, the government gets called on you guys. How do you keep that morale high despite everything that you guys were faced with?
Yeah, that was a great question. And once again, that theme that idea is a huge theme in the book, because that was such a crippling force. We would go on these online forums and read the stuff people said about us, and it was so debilitating. Like, our family was turned into a spectacle, and the stuff people said, I mean, it was like, it's pretty shocking to still go back and read it. And the only way we learned to deal with it was to essentially block it out and to have the discipline to not even listen to it. Because when I listen to it, I get kind of caught up in that conversation of these people that had all these strong opinions, but no vested interest in our actual family. So we had to learn to separate voices from people who had skin in the game, which was any hiker. If you're hiking with us and you have an opinion about how you think we could hike better or do something better, I'll listen to you, because you're out there with your own blood, sweat, and tears with us. You were our teammate in a way. But if you're at home on a fucking keyboard and you have a strong opinion about us, I had to learn that even whether your stuff is real or true, it has no bearing on my actual life. And we had to get really good at, like I said, almost like not accessing that information and just realizing it was not helpful for us at all, and separate the they and them, like this huge glob of people that exist out there that have this opinion, who I wish would all like us, and I wish they would all be proven wrong by us and all this stuff. That's such fiction. So yeah, we learned that people will critique us. People that are insecure will find something wrong with us always, if you live a public life. And if you take that shit personally, it's going to be paralyzing and debilitating. And it just takes away from energy moving forward. I mean, on the hike, we literally had the choice to walk or to read stuff. And it was so much more productive for us to walk. So we got good at blocking people out.
Very cool. Stay on the task at hand, right?
Yeah, you got to stay focused, and you got to find the people that are cheering you on, because there was also thousands of people cheering us on. And we had more than 100 people come out and bring us meals and invite us into their homes. And we stayed with a cult. We stayed with an Amish family. We stayed in a CrossFit gym. I mean, we had all these weird stories. We stayed in abandoned churches. So there was all sorts of people that were fans, but you know how it is. Like, you'll get like 10 reviews on iTunes and one will be negative, and you want to be like, oh, I need to change that guy's mind, or like, but it's like, don't even read it. Like, go to the 9 that are positive, and those are your people.
I love that, man. Have you found that your kids are more resilient because of those lessons on how to deal with adversity and how to deal with the haters, and especially kids in the age range that I have, that you have? You know, haters, that hurts their feelings, man. They are super. I think as we get older, like, our age, we tend to be like, yeah, that kind of sucks. It kind of hurts. But after a while, you're like, whatever. It's exactly what you said. People who have their own insecurities are going to come out, and they're going to bash whatever they see or whatever you're doing, all that good stuff. Kids are a little different. They don't really know that yet. So have you found over the past couple of years that their skin has gotten a lot tougher?
Yeah, especially when it comes to like the internet public, because, we have a YouTube channel that has 50,000 subscribers. So people always have opinions, and our kids have learned, I think, like kind of what I generally follow is there's 2 or 3 or 4 people in my life that I'll actually listen to. Like, if you have a beef with me, if you want to tell me something that you see that's not really nice or popular, I'll listen to 3 or 4 or 5 people max. And that doesn't mean I'm going to do what you say, but I'll at least hear you out and take what you say seriously. beyond that, if you're one of a million people in the world or internet, or because you got our YouTube URL or picked up our book, and just because you have an opinion, that doesn't entitle you for me to take what you say seriously.
Yeah.
On either side, it's kind of weird. Even on the praise side, we've had to learn to tune out the negative stuff, and we've also had to learn how to tune out the positive stuff and decide that we're going to write the kind of stuff we want to, not just the type of stuff our audience is demanding. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it goes both ways. It's a double-edged sword, like living a public life and having a podcast or writing a book.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, man, listen, as we wrap up here, I would love to ask you what big things you have on the horizon or what's got you most excited, but I feel like you've done so many big things already. But what does 2021 look like for you, for your family?
Well, yeah, we're always doing stuff. And right now I'm just pushing the, like publicizing the book and trying to get word out there. I'm working on writing another book about money and my professional blackjack days. We gave our kids a house last year. That's, so there's our house, my parents' house. Next door to that is a house that we gave them. It was a total dump. And we gave them $45,000. And we said, do whatever you want with it. Like, you can sell it, you can fix it up, you can rent it out, you can live in it. So they're working on that. So it's fun watching that. And we're making pretty much daily YouTube videos. And we are planning another hike. That's actually a longer one that I don't want to give away yet. But we're talking about a year out, where who was 2, I think he'll be 5 or 6. So he'll be able to walk that one himself.
You guys going to do like the Great Wall of China or something?
No, it'll be in America, but
just going to be like Forrest Gump, go from one end of the country to the other and then back.
I wouldn't mind, there's crazier ways to live than doing something like that, I think.
True. I guess if you really want to live on the edge, you would do all that hiking and stop for McDonald's every day at lunch.
There's then you're getting all the danger in one and not missing out on any of it.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, man, as we wrap up here, I want to make sure everybody can find your book, can find your blog, your YouTube channel. So just let us know. We'll have everything in the show notes, but let us know where we can find all that.
Yeah. So the book is called 2,000 Miles Together, and it's the story of the largest family to hike the Appalachian Trail. It's on Amazon, and you can also buy it on our merch store, which helps us more directly when you buy directly from the artist. Our YouTube channel is called Fight for Together, FIGHTFOR Together. And that's kind of all of our Appalachian Trail videos. We have like 120 videos that we filmed on the trail are all on that channel, as well as an hour-long documentary if you're into that. And then our Instagram and Facebook are also Fight for Together. So that's where you can follow our family if you're interested.
I love it, man. I'm smiling because my 4-year-old is back here. Mommy.
Yep.
But no,
that's like,
honestly, man, this has been a pleasure. This has been a lot of fun. Out of 650 episodes, I've never had a guest like you. I've never had a guest with your story, with your experiences. And the really cool theme as we wrap up here is you really taught a lot of amazing lessons. How to give up our own egos and pride and nobility a little bit, as far as what we perceive nobility to be. How we can sometimes get in the way of the greatness of our kids by us doing the work and not allowing them to do it. Taking full ownership and giving them choice into what it is that they're going to do, and supporting them either way. What you learned about marriage and what you learned about being a man and being a leader. So appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Yeah, happy to be able to share it. Thanks for doing the thing you're doing, Larry.
Hey, back at you, my friend. So, gentlemen, that's all we got time for today. Again, we're talking to Ben Crawford. You can find everything that we talked about today. Just go to gooddadproject.com/303 for this episode. Again, gooddadproject.com/303. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll find in the very few first minutes, the eyeball on the left hand of Ben's, that is badass, my friend. Ben, appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Yeah, man. Good chatting. Send me the links and stuff, and we'll post it to all of our stuff as well.
Sounds great, my friend. Gentlemen, go out and live with purpose. And above all else, live legendary. Take care.